For 40 years, the National Hot Rod Association has staged the biggest of all drag races, the U.S. Nationals. Calvin Rice won the first event in Great Bend, Kansas in 1955, and since then, the sport and its heritage have made incredible changes. For the next 60 minutes, you're invited to take a stroll down the quarter-mile memory lane through 4 decades of the greatest drag race in the world.
I've done it all at Indy.
The 1979 U.S. Nationals champion.
It's the biggest drag race in the world.
In your drag racing career, if you never win Indy, it's never complete.
It's just the race. It is the drag race.
It is the race to win. I think any racer will tell you that.
It's the one you all shoot at. That's the one that people remember you by.
It's a 1,000-acre ballpark with 1,000 cars there.
It's sort of like the World Series of drag racing.
It's like the Super Bowl. The U.S. Nationals, for some reason, when you roll in the gate on that very first day, you get chills running down your spine like no other event, because it's obviously the granddaddy of them all.
That's the biggest, baddest race in the world.
And Prudhomme smokes the tires, McEwen pulling ahead.
It's like an old friend kind of going back and visiting once a year.
That sounds like Indy to me.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Evans.
And I'm Dave McClelland.
Mac and I just tallied it up, and collectively, between the two of us, we have made 64 U.S. Nationals appearances.
And I've got about 5 years on you on that. In fact, in 1956, I was there when Calvin Rice made the first ever 9-second elapsed time run, and today they're running in the 4s.
My first U.S. Nationals was mid-60s, Don Prudhomme's first top fuel victory, and since then, speeds have risen over 100 miles an hour.
Well, Steve, in the next hour, you're going to get a chance to join us as we take a look back at 40 years of the U.S. Nationals.
From Kansas to Indiana, with a couple of stops in between.
Steve, there's no other race that evokes the emotion of both the spectator, the driver, the crew member as the U.S. Nationals. And it also paints a panorama of the evolution of today's drag racing car. From the vehicle you're looking at, that sleek, long machine with the big wings, back to the early days, when they had the very short wheelbase and no wing at all, no downforce provided. These were the earliest days of top fuel racing, the transition years. You can see the difference between then and now, and it is substantial indeed.
Well, David, as dramatic as the top fuel dragster evolution is, what about the funny cars? They've gone from almost jalopy-looking creations to something out of Star Wars. Originally just converted stock cars, the rear axle relocated, that made them funny-looking, hence the name funny cars. But now they're anything but funny.
These cars with their fiberglass composite bodies developed out of an original stock-bodied car, believe it or not, in its very earliest form. They had steel bodies with just a very minor amount of weight-saving devices. Now, they are highly exotic machines. Pro stock eliminator race cars of today got their birth as a stock-bodied car delivered from the factory.
Yeah, the evolution was much like the funny car, except NHRA's rules maker stepped in and said, hold it, that's enough. We've got to keep these street looking, and wow, do the fans love them.
Steve, while they retain their original body shape, these are highly sophisticated race cars. And what is developed with today's modern pro stock class is literally the closest category in competition in NHRA drag racing. And the U.S. Nationals has had some of the most memorable victories of them all. This sprawling facility, Indianapolis Raceway Park, the permanent home of the U.S. Nationals, but it didn't always look like this.
No, it didn't. And in this video, it will be interesting to kind of look in the background and notice how the park evolves much as the sport has. Parks Tower, dedicated in 1983. Little did we know, this was the forerunner of the stadium-style drag strips that have been built all over the country and are still under construction. Parks Tower, of course, dedicated to NHRA founder Wally Parks, his wife Barbara. They loved that moment, as we all did, Dave. Even the racers were saying, it's about time. Now we've got something to be proud of.
And pride is something that everyone has, because this is what it looked like back in 1955 when racers came from all over the country to participate in the first national event ever conducted. It wasn't called the U.S. Nationals then, it was just the plain old Nationals because there was only one race.
How did so many competitors all over the country hear about this big event? Well, through the pages of Hot Rod magazine, which everybody read, and Wally Parks, not coincidentally, was the editor of Hot Rod.
Well, the early races were conducted on very primitive facilities. We started out in Kansas on an airport runway, and it was a tremendous experience for all of us because it was all trial and error, and it was everybody's dedication and determination that made it happen.
And of course, back in the mid-1950s, airports, either abandoned or active, were the sites of drag races all over the United States. Great Bend, it had the distinction of having the very first race, but they had to wait 2 weeks for the final round to be decided when Calvin Rice took the win because it rained out.
In fact, the finals were held in Phoenix, Arizona because the finalists were from the western part of the United States. And you're right, Calvin Rice with a fuel-burning flathead was the first ever Nationals top eliminator.
And he started a tradition that is carried on until this day, receiving the accolades for the titles. Kansas City, Missouri. Steve, this was the first U.S. Nationals that I had the privilege of attending. It was on a racetrack down in the river bottoms alongside the Missouri River.
Were you announcing?
No, I wasn't. Just there with a guy running a dragster, and we had a great time.
Ingenuity in action was the battle cry, and you saw it all, from stripped-down bear rails like that to, how about the aircraft Allison engine car of Art Arfons, the Green Monster. And we started to see the first of the small block Chevy V8s. Remember, this was 1956, and they were starting to hit the track.
Oklahoma City was the home of the U.S. Nationals for the next 2 years, 1957 and 1958. They got a little creative in those days, too, not only with the cars, but with the video.
The fans today love the burnouts. Back then, the entire race was one big burnout. And the cars, Dave, were frightful. They were very difficult to control, and I don't believe nearly as safe as what we have today.
Detroit, Michigan. The next 2 years, 1959 and 1960, was the home base for the biggest drag race in the world, the U.S. Nationals. The cars becoming a little bit more exotic, and in those days, onboard cameras were also state-of-the-art. Look, a rear-engine dragster dating back to the 59 and 60 era.
Well, the flagman's days were numbered, and so were the days of multi-engine power plants. They would soon fade away.
1961, the Nationals had grown in size that it needed a permanent home, and it found it at Indianapolis Raceway Park. But the park, a far cry from what it is today.
But still, even in those days, it was a magnificent facility. In fact, it cost over $1 million in the 60s. It had an oval and a road course, and the first tech inspection was so huge, they had to move it out of the racetrack into a shopping center over on Speedway Avenue.
Back in those days, Eddie Hill was just a youngster and had a twin-engine car.
We took our big old heavy twin-engine Pontiac there with our dual rear slicks, and that car was so heavy and had so much power, and the asphalt was fresh. Literally ripped up the asphalt and flipped it backwards. I actually dug out a divot of fresh asphalt, flipped it back when I ran that big old heavy car. And Buster took the divot, he put it back in there, tamped it down, and said, "Now don't run here anymore, run over there next time."
I watched it come with just a piece of asphalt and a tower to a big stadium type of deal, and it's just fantastic.
Steve, I remember those days very well because it was 1961 that I announced my first national event, the U.S. Nationals, and it has been my honor, privilege, and pleasure to have been there every year since that time.
1961 was one of the years of the now infamous Nitro ban, but a young man out of Atlanta, Georgia named Pete Robinson in a Dragmaster car with white wall slicks on the back won top eliminator over Tom McEwen. He would forever be known as Sneaky Pete Robinson.
Steve, one of the reasons why he was called Sneaky was back in those days he had a little hand jack in the car, could lever the rear wheels off the ground, got them spinning. When the flag was thrown, he'd drop it down on the ground. He was running 840s and nobody else was close. We, in fact, could not even announce his time until he had done it 2 or 3 times because everybody knew he had to be doing something wrong.
By 1963, the flag starter was sitting in the grandstands, and along came an electronic device called the Christmas tree. And the drag racers, for the most part, hated it. For a number of reasons. It had a few glitches occasionally. I think the big thing was you couldn't fault it. It was either red or it was green, and you couldn't buy a couple of beers and a cheap steak dinner the night before to get on its good side.
The Christmas tree may have cut down on the restaurant and bar business in Indianapolis, but it did pick up one thing, and that is red lights. Because as the racers tried to adapt to this new starting system, a lot of them left the red light glowing on the tree. Of course, the same problem exists today.
With one major exception, now they have the pros start. In these days, stock cars are top fuel. You all had a 2.5-second long countdown. A lot of guys just couldn't wait, just couldn't be that patient. But there was one young man, a guy by the name of Bobby Vodnik, who figured out just how to massage that tree. He'd stand up in the starting line and tap his foot until he got it down perfect. And who was to be his victim in the final round of 1963 on gasoline, the last year of gas at Indy? None other than Don Garlits.
Steve, that's me announcing in 1963 as Don Garlits was unable to wait. Look how quick he was on the tree. Bobby Vodnik picked up the U.S. Nationals title, and I must admit, that's the last we ever heard of Bobby Vodnik.
Well, in 1965, another young man came to Indy, bringing a big West Coast reputation, Don the Snake Prudhomme, driving for Roland Leong. It was my first year at the U.S. Nationals, and I will never forget it, as the Snake beat Tommy Ivo for his first Nationals title.
Driving the Hawaiian dragster with Roland Leong as an owner and Keith Black tuning it, and we went in there and won the U.S. Nationals, which was, it was just the highlight of my career there. It was great.
Well, 1965 may have started a long career of U.S. Nationals victories and memorable moments for Don Prudhomme. Probably the one that I remember the most. He was involved in a race for the final in 1970 against Jim Nicole.
This footage was shot by ABC's Wide World of Sports, and to this day they use it in every anniversary special. It is that dramatic.
Nicole and Prudhomme left the starting line together, but the incident occurred at the finish.
His clutch came out of his car right in the lights and cut his car in half, and he went over the guardrail, and I went spinning down at the end of the track, following his car, and I figured he had lost his life at that time. That had a big moment in my life.
The emotions of Don Prudhomme, the year 1970, as he watched the car of Jim Nicole cut into. Nicole bounced over the guardrail. That's Roland Leong standing behind Don Prudhomme. The ironic thing is, Jim Nicole sat across from Steve and I at the winner's banquet the next night.
Don said at that time, well, he didn't know whether he wanted to continue racing or not, and I told him that I thought that if the shoe was on the opposite foot, that you'd want him to keep racing.
Well, Snake got over the emotions of that moment, and not only did he keep on racing, he moved into the funny car category, much to the dismay of everybody else in it, because he just dominated Mac. This was 1974. Billy Meyer was in the far lane, and this was Tuesday morning after a Monday Labor Day rainout, as I recall. Billy Meyer had set the national record earlier in the weekend, but you don't give a 19-year-old kid 24 hours to think about it, and Prudhomme 24 hours to get his act together.
This win in 1974 over Billy Meyer was the second in a row for the Snake as he made the move to funny car and made it pay off. His wife Lynn offering congratulations, and Bob Brandt, who was the crew chief in the glory days of Don Prudhomme when he was running the U.S. Army funny car.
In 1983, we thought 580s from funny cars was spectacular. Prudhomme in 1983 rewrote the record book as few ever have. A 5.63, the car in the far lane.
If I was back home and I heard this was going on here, I wouldn't believe it, but I'm driving the car, and I'm here to tell you the car's doing it. It's an incredible racetrack. It always has been here.
We fast forward to 1989. It's now the Skoal Bandit Pontiac, and Don Prudhomme pulled off one of those rare doubles. This was the last year he was in a funny car, Steve.
It was, Dave, and I think if you ask the Snake, he will tell you this was his favorite U.S. Nationals experience because he did it Snake style. He just ripped their throats out. This was the final round of the Big Bud Shootout. He was up against John Forrest in the days when you could beat Forrest, and the Snake consistently in the 5 teens.
We now move one day later to the U.S. Nationals weekend. It's one thing to win the race within a race and the big bonus bucks that come from Budweiser. But the U.S. Nationals title is what every drag racer wants to win. And Prudhomme did it in fine style. A 5:19, needless to say, a big payday weekend.
I thank the drag racers feel the same way about Indianapolis as the IndyCar guys do about the 500, or perhaps the Winston car guys do about the Daytona 500. You know, it's a race